Hey, and welcome again to investingsuccess.ca and another of my short podcasts. Today is the 5th of September, 2023. Turn on any financial media outlet, Bloomberg, CNBC. You're going to hear a lot of angst. You're going to hear a lot of fear mongering. China is about to implode. The currency is going to zero. The entire economy is going to fall into deep recession. That's going to spread around the world. It's going to kill us all. The media, as we know, likes to thrive on fear and angst. That's how they manage to maintain viewership and eyes watching them. Let's look beyond the angst and let's take a more reasoned approach. Let's see what we can figure out as to what is happening in China. So, what we do know is the Chinese population is getting older. They've got some demographic challenges. And these challenges stem from years ago when they introduced their one child policy. So, that policy has now come full circle and it is literally biting China in the ass. And as the population gets older, this means fewer people are available to work in the factories. The factories are what has propelled the Chinese economy over the past 20, 25 years. These factories have made gadgets and widgets that have been exported. These are the same products that you and I have bought at Walmart, Dollar General, and so on. Now, in addition, other neighboring Asian countries, an example, Vietnam, these other countries have started manufacturing consumer goods for export, and these other countries don't have the same demographic challenges that China has. So China has had some pretty stiff competition. Now, when it comes to competition, India, that's the big one. India is a country with a population of 1 billion people. And the interesting thing about India is back in the 1800s, it was part of the British Empire. So India rests on the British governance model. India is a democracy and it has elected officials, whereas China is a dictatorship. And the dictator is, of course, Mr. Xi Jinping. And he has wasted no time in asserting his iron fist management style. And I think he's even declared himself to be president for life. You know what? You do stuff like that, you're going to scare away foreign investment. You're going to drive money out of the country. People of means and influence are going to take their money and they're going to leave. And that's exactly what's happened. So China really has got some serious problems. So in that sense, the media is right. I just don't know that the country is going to implode and everything go to zero, but they do have problems. Now, if you think back to when Mr. Trump was president of the US, he took some pretty bold moves and he started to slap China into place. He started to impose some very crippling trade sanctions on China. And Mr. Biden recently has continued the work of Mr. Trump. Mr. Biden has shifted his focus a little bit and he is focused on technology. So, for example, China is a manufacturer of semiconductor chips. It takes equipment, it takes technology to make those chips. And I do know that in the past 6 months, there was a group of countries, notable among them the Netherlands, that all got together and they made it very, very difficult for China to acquire the equipment necessary to make high-end semiconductor chips. So between the general trade sanctions and this clampdown on technology, the U.S. has really backed China deeper into a corner. So not good. Here's a chart of the Chinese GDP. And as you can see, it peaked in and around 2007, but it peaked at double digits. I mean, it was like a 14% rate of growth back then. We have not seen those rates of growth since for all of the reasons that I have just discussed. Now, in 2020, when COVID was taking its toll, the Chinese economy basically shut down. And it reopened, but then it closed again, and now it's reopening. But it's not the same. I mean, China now is growing at single digits, and this could very well be what it does going forward. So the China of today is not the China that we have known over the past 25 years. The currency is weakening. So if you consider that back in, late 2021, it took about 6 Chinese yuan to buy $1. Where are we today? 7.3. So absolutely, the currency has weakened. That is not good, and that is pointing to a lack of confidence in the Chinese economy. And I think all of the reasons that I've illuminated up till now really point to what is behind this lack of confidence in China and its currency. Real estate, here's the big one, and you're hearing about this in the media right now. A year and a half, 2 years ago, there was headlines about a Chinese developer called Evergrande. It had to be bailed out. Here we go again. There's a number of developers that really have, for some reason, overextended themselves. There are apparently real estate developments in China that are sitting vacant. There are real estate developments where the developers have taken money from people and people have taken out mortgages. And because the developers are in trouble, they haven't turned ground and started construction. So people are making mortgage payments on buildings that are not under construction, that don't exist. And the whole thing is just boiling over into a mess. And will the Chinese have to bail out some of these developers again? Maybe. Time will tell. But that is the big nut right now that is, again, affecting the currency, affecting the confidence in the Chinese economy. So over the next several weeks, it's going to be interesting to see what China does with regards to these troubled real estate developers. Now, here's how I look at China. I'm going to look at it through the lens of the Shanghai Stock Exchange. So the Shanghai Stock Exchange was, I guess you could say, dusted off, revived. The framework was put back into place in late November of 1990. And then a few weeks later, in December 19th, 1990, the Shanghai Exchange formally resumed operations. So what do we see here? Well, we have the ascendant at 13 of Capricorn. We have the midheaven at 1 of Scorpio. And I find it interesting that we have, the planets are all jammed into basically what amounts to 26 of Sagittarius to 29 of Capricorn, almost a 30-degree increment of the horoscope. Everything is just squeezed in there. But that is the first trade horoscope chart then for the beginning or the resumption of operational actions on the Shanghai Exchange. So what I'm going to be looking for as I analyze the Chinese equity market, what happens when the moon passes these key points in the natal chart? What happens when Sun passes these key points? What happens when Mars passes these key points? Let's take a look at a little bit of an example here. Okay, here's a chart of the Shanghai Composite Index, and I've started the chart back in November of 2022 when not only the Chinese market reached the bottom, but the global equity markets did as well. And to keep things fairly straightforward here, I'm just going to focus on 4 points here. So let's take a look at point number one, when the market bottomed in late October 2022. Let's take a look at another point where the market made a peak in May of 2023. Let's take another look here when it made a secondary high, a lower high in what looks like August of 2023. And then let's take a look more recently here in late August again when it made a bit of a low. But you can see the trend. The trend is to the downside. We're making some lower highs. This is not good. Now, what can we discern about these 4 points? Well, point number one, the sun was at the natal midheaven. The moon was at the natal sun. Mercury and Venus were passing the natal midheaven. So you had 3 cosmic events that conspired to form this low at what I've got labeled as point number one. Point number two, the high in May of 2023, I see moon at natal moon. Point number 3, I see moon at natal ascendant. I see sun at natal Jupiter. And more recently, point number 4, I had Mars at natal Mars. So what can we conclude? Astrology works with respect to the Shanghai Stock Exchange. Once I know that first trade date, everything just falls into place. So we can now use a little bit of astrology to sort of probe into the future to see what potentially could happen. And here's what I can tell you. In early October, like in a month, less than a month, we're going to have Mars passing the natal midheaven from December 19th, 1990. And at the same time, we're going to have Moon passing the natal ascendant. Later in October, we're going to have Sun passing the natal midheaven. So I guess what I'm looking for here is for some resolution. Will the Chinese government bail out some of these troubled real estate developers? Will they make everything right by just printing money? Possibly they will. And if they are going to do it, it's going to happen probably early in October. I'm not going to speculate beyond that, but for here and now, the trend is down on the Chinese market. Be very, very careful. And if they do print massive amounts of money, that potentially could further erode confidence in the Chinese yuan as a currency. It's not going to go to zero, but it will continue to weaken. And will the markets recover if the government prints massive amounts of money and bails everybody out? Quite likely they will. Will that make China a screaming investment opportunity? I would be very careful. For the simple reason that the country itself is run by a dictator with an iron fist. That right there is reason for me not to buy an ETF or anything that is reflective of China. But do keep your eye on this early October point. I think something is going to happen. And I'll update this video in October once we get some further news. And let's see what the next few months after that portend. So there's your astrology then of the Shanghai Stock Exchange, the Chinese equity market. And once again, the astrology does work. Okay, that's it for me for here and now. 2024 edition of the Almanac, it's done in rough format. I now have to go back and clean it up and then get it on to my editor. So everything's on track there. And don't forget to visit me at investingsuccess.ca. I've got a couple of my subscription-based newsletters. You can also find me on Substack, where I identify myself as Planetary Trader. And I've got my courses on udemy.com. And just remember that everything that happens in the financial markets is about the trend. The markets are either going to be trending up, bullish, or trending down, bearish. and there's a number of mathematical indicators that can help you identify the changes of trend. And the fascinating thing that keeps me glued to all of this is when the trend changes, you can 95% of the time identify an astrology event that is occurring at the same time. And you can also generally identify a Fibonacci mathematical event, retracement, if you will, that happens at the same time. So as above, so below, it's all tied together. We just have to learn and discipline ourselves to identify it and to recognize when the trend is changing. All right, that's it for me. Thank you kindly for taking the time to listen to my thoughts and comments on China, and we will talk in the very near future. Have a great day.